I know from Ridley that James Cameron called him when he was making that movie and said, "You did everything. All I can do is make it an action movie." Well, he works for Ridley Scott, so I think his answer's clear.
Okay, guys, let me start with the simplest, but I think the most important question. I'm sure you get asked this a lot, but alien or aliens? Or are you feeling maybe bold and you'll say Prometheus?
Well, he works for Ridley Scott, so I think his answer's clear. What I told Sir Ridley is I said, I'm adapting your movie, right? And I think, I've made 5 seasons of Fargo. I love all of them. You can't really argue that the proof of concept is in the first film, right? And I know from Ridley that James Cameron called him when he was making that movie and said, "You did everything. All I can do is make it an action movie," and I think it's one of the greatest action movies of all time. But for me, the feeling that I was trying to give the audience is rooted in the feeling of the first film.
But it must have felt intimidating. So what's more intimidating, following the Coens with Fargo or following the three-headed hydra of Ridley Scott, James Cameron, David Fincher with Aliens?
I try not to think about that. It's what I get excited about is the opportunity to have the conversation. Both the conversation literally with the filmmakers who inspired me, but also for the material that I create to be in dialogue with those films. And what was so fun with the Coens is when they read the first script and then they faxed me some pages, playing with the scene that I had written, and that moment of play is one of the great moments for me. So it's just really been great to take their work and then be inspired by it and give my work back.
And I think the appeal of the Alien series is the fact that with each director brings something new to the table. So how do you balance doing the pastiche? And by the way, you do a very sweet pastiche of Nostromo.
Thank you.
And doing something new, evolving the series, which you also do. How do you balance this?
Yeah, I mean, after 7 movies, there's surprisingly little mythology, right? We don't know how humanity is organized in the universe. We don't really know what Earth is like. So that was a gift for me as a storyteller to not have a lot of constraints. The other thing is that all we really know about the universe is that there's a corporation called Weyland-Yutani, right? The biggest challenge for me is that, I've introduced these competing corporations and a lot of the aesthetic of the show is rooted outside of Weyland-Yutani. And so the show needs to feel like Alien, right? So the Prodigy Corporation can't be an Apple store. That doesn't feel like Alien. So that was the challenge really is of exploring outside of the boundaries of the film, but still staying true to the film.
Okay, and Alien is mostly survival horror, and one might say that this is a very cinematic experience. So how do you translate this to the TV?
In long-form storytelling, right, you can't just be a survival story because that survival story is on a clock, right? You saw it in Fede's last movie. They literally had 45 minutes to do everything they had to do. We are investing for 10 or 20 or 50 hours in a group of characters who don't die, right? So it becomes more of a long form storytelling, and so you have this balance of both the creature horror and what I like to think of as moral horror, the horror of humanity, of the things that people do to each other. And you have these children who are in adult bodies who are trying to figure out how to be a grown-up, and they're looking around at the grown-ups, and the grown-ups are not good people, and they have to decide, well, should we stay human or should we choose to be something other? And I think those questions are fascinating, and for an audience, as they watch it as a drama, then when we have those genre elements come in, it just elevates.
But also, it is still a world-building undertaking, not only in terms of the creature expansion, but the fact that Noah was able to sort of extrapolate from how our world is currently evolving to one that we can recognize and in some ways have some great hesitancy as we're barreling toward it.
And you stick to the tradition by keeping by having female heroine, but she's very different. Wendy is very different than Ripley. So can you tell me a little bit more about Wendy and why she is like she is?
Well, she's a child. She's a 12-year-old girl in this adult body, and you know, she is like Wendy and Peter Pan. She is the leader in many ways. You know, she's driven by this desire to find and protect her brother. It's a very human relationship that is driving her forward. But I think what she's realizing and these other children are realizing is that they're the property of this corporation. And, you know, so much of what Alien is this sort of class story. It's space truckers, it's soldiers, and they're working for this corporation, and you realize that the individual really has no power. So that mythology of Alien is still very much within this world.
And I think there's an inherent problem with Xenomorph, the fact that by now everybody knows its life cycle. So is introducing new creatures a way of solving this problem? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, that feeling that you had the first time you watched Alien and the facehugger became a chestburster, became a 10-foot monster. You know, at each point you had this horror, this revulsion, this biological resistance to the story that you were watching. But once you know that story, now you're never going to feel that feeling again. And that's why to introduce these new creatures that you don't know how they breed or what they eat, you know, it brings back that feeling that you thought was gone forever.
It was certainly Ridley's biggest concern. I mean, it is akin to what you mentioned with the conversation with Cameron is what more can you do with that creature? Fascinating how Noah has still managed to sort of extend that experience, but in many ways, introducing these additional characters also brought another steep challenge on top of everything else Noah was trying to craft here, because those are extremely difficult, not only to imagine, but also to render in sort of a convincing and ultimately horrifying way.
So do you have a recipe for coming up with a creature which is as disgusting and as iconic as Xenomorph?
Well, it's function over form, right? It you know, for me, the litmus test was always a feeling in the back of my neck, the hair standing up, or that squeamishness of you know, you want, after every episode, you want the audience to go, well, I'm never going to do that again, right? I'm never going to eat something without looking at it. I'm never going to, you know, it's that feeling of, you know, that you got from, say, the movie Paranormal Activity, where you realize, oh, when I'm asleep, I'm just laying there the whole night. You know, it makes you think about the things that you don't normally think about, and you know, I think that's the true test of it is how disturbed are people going to bed that night.
I was startled when I asked Noah, well, which are the creatures you discarded? But apparently he only thought of the ones he used, and there were no excess.
You can continue to innovate with them, right? Going forward in series. That's, you know, that was the real discovery of Dan O'Bannon and Giger is like, just when you thought it was the worst thing ever, it's on your face, and you know, now it falls off, and you're like, oh, thank God that's over, and then you're like, oh, that's so much worse.
Okay, thank you guys.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.